but that length of stint and that age of tyre was looking like it was just going to be quite marginal at the end of the race.
Hi, I'm Cameron and I'm here with James to answer your questions about the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. So James, question from one of our fans via YouTube. Did the upgrades that we brought this weekend work out as we expected them to?
I would say yes. This weekend's stuff was actually part 2 of a part 1 that arrived, the first half of which arrived in the previous race, and we completed that step in Imola. It's always hard to judge because you're comparing whether your stuff is working on a playing field that is continuously in motion. A lot of other teams were bringing new kit. Ferrari with their upgrade in Imola, and McLaren with a load of stuff for the previous race. You measure what you measure on your car, but ultimately the truly telling thing about whether your stuff worked is, did you move forwards? Because that's the purpose of upgrades. Is it actually propelling you up the grid in any meaningful way? And I would say, based on the race pace that we saw in Imola, that we took a gentle step forward. We are several tenths of a second now nearer the front than we were at the start of the year. And in Imola itself, I think we moved a tenth or two nearer to the front. So pretty happy with that.
I know how hard everyone at the factory has been working to bring these upgrades. So what's the next phase of that looking forward into the season?
Well, it certainly has been a push. It's the factory's really on a war footing at the moment, and the reason that upgrade package came in 2 parts is originally it was slated to arrive in 1 slab, but we brought forward what we could to get it a little bit quicker. But yeah, so big old push, and our challenge now is just to keep that momentum coming. We have some more pieces for the car, aerodynamic and others, that will arrive for Monaco, again for Canada, and again in the races to follow. So just keeping on slogging the assets back in the factory that find the lap time, to design them, build them, get them out on the car, and hopefully just force our way up the grid.
Okay, so next question from one of our fans in the community on Weibo. Why did the car behave differently on Friday as it did to Saturday?
The cars always behave differently through the weekend because the canvas on which you're working is not a constant thing. The track conditions change, the atmospheric conditions change, and you are modifying the setup as you go along. Friday was quite a windy day, and Saturday somewhat less so. Paradoxically, although the wind normally ruins a car in terms of its handling, I think there's a little bit of evidence building that the wind ruins us a little bit less than some of our competitors. So as the wind drops away, then maybe some advantage, relative advantage, just trickles away slightly as well. But we're talking about small things here, because actually there was not really a substantial difference in the prediction of our competitiveness on Friday and that which was realised on Saturday. Lewis had a little bit of a harder time in qualifying, felt the back end of the car coming a little bit loose towards the end of the qualifying lap. George, on the other hand, was reasonably content. So I don't think there was actually much difference overall, but if I had to pick a thing, then I would say that the lessening wind for Saturday maybe just took a little from us in relative terms to our competitors. Of course, the lessening wind in absolute terms makes you go quicker, but did it make the others go a bit quicker than it made us go?
So a question that's come in via Instagram: are you happy with the improvements we've made in our pit stops?
Broadly, yes. I think last year the pit stops were not really at a competitive level. They were consistent, but they were consistently offset from the front by an amount that was more than we were comfortable with. Quite a big effort over the winter on the design of the kit to make that more consistent, give it so that the pit stop crew can be more confident in the way they handle the wheels off and on the car, and the action that the gunman can take. And then an awful lot of practice from the pit crew before the season and during to make sure that we're making good on the promise that was sort of built into the design changes that we did over the winter. And it does seem to be coming together. That was a very clean set of stops in Imola, and it's a really good weekend set against a general improvement that has been noticeable this year.
Was there any particular issue with George's second stint on the hard tyres?
The pace of George relative to Lewis on his second stint, and corrected it for both the fuel mass and the tyre age. The two cars were very well overlaid, so there was no real inherent difference between the way that Lewis was pedaling and the way that George was. The difference between the two cars were that George's first pit stop or first stint length was much shorter, which meant that by the time he was out on his second stint with the hard rubber, his tyres were older than everyone else's, which just meant that he had a longer stint to go, and his tyres were that much more degraded compared to those he was on the track with at the same time. And the pace of the car was about what it should be for that length of stint and that age of tyre, but that length of stint and that age of tyre was looking like it was just going to be quite marginal at the end of the race. And so on a precautionary basis, we decided that we would stop George a second time, put him on fresh rubber, get him that chance at fastest lap, which obviously is beneficial for the team on points, making sure that he had no risk of running out of rubber and suffering sort of premature failure towards the very end of the race. So no, nothing wrong with the tyre in that stint at all, really just paying the price for a first stint that was a little bit on the short side.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, was the degradation on Sunday higher than we thought it was going to be? And if so, why?
It was a little higher than we thought it was going to be, but that's not really a statement about us. That's a statement about the race. Typically what you do on a Friday is you run the tyres, you try to be quite heavy-footed with them, try to really push them as hard as you think they'll go. And in doing that, you establish a sort of upper bound for the rate at which those tyres will degrade. And then history has shown that in the race itself, the drivers will be more cautious, they'll be more gentle, and they can sort of caress the tyres into going longer with less degradation than you might see on the Friday. And it's a matter of judgment, a judgment that the tyre engineers and the strategy engineers have to make before the race on Sunday about how much to reduce what we measured on Friday in terms of degradation, how much to reduce that to make a prediction for the degradation that you will then see in the race. You could have, for example, it wouldn't be at all unusual to have half the degradation in the race that you see on the Friday. But this is very much a matter of judgment. If Sunday comes along and for whatever reason the pace of the race is higher, the way the cars are pushing means that they are leaning deeper into the rubber than you maybe anticipated, then that degradation can be pushing up towards the Friday levels. And indeed that's what we saw across the grid. The degradation was not quite at the Friday level for the grid, but not a long way away from it. Our deg as a whole was, very much not anything different to the rest of the field, but the whole field was running a relatively high degradation in Imola, a race which is normally a nailed-on one stop, and it was for practically everybody. But the degradation was getting to the level where you might start to think about two-stopping if it had gone much higher. So yeah, a thing that everybody has to make a judgment about, a thing that we didn't really suffer from particularly worse than any other team. But I would say that with George's race, if we could do that race again, we'd have left him out longer in the first stint. And I think if he could do that race again as well, he would be less worried about the feeling that his rear tyres were going away, because they were going away for everybody. And if he'd hung on a few more laps, then he would have had the margin in the second stint not to need the second stop, etc., etc.
So, James, we've got Monaco coming up next, where we know qualifying is absolutely key. One of our fans wanted to know whether we'll focus on setting up the car more for qualifying trim rather than race trim on the Sunday.
Yes and no at the same time. I think one of the main things you need to do at Monaco is to make sure that you spend as much time on the track as possible in the free practice sessions. Things change so dramatically from the opening laps of free practice to the end of free practice 3. generally speaking, the teams that do well there are the ones that don't hang around in the garage, but are just out there on the track, remembering what it takes to drive at Monaco, finding the confidence to push nearer to the walls, and just tuning the car as the weekend conditions change. That's the sort of overriding compulsion when you're wanting a good Monaco weekend. And while it is definitely the case, qualifying is super key at Monaco, you can't afford to ignore the race pace on top of that. You just can't afford to, because you can, let's imagine you do a wonderful qualifying session and you manage to get the car right at the best it could possibly be if it were just focused on a single lap. Well, bravo you, but come Sunday, you will find a trail of cars behind you. And at a certain point, you'll get frightened that they're going to undercut you and get past you into the lead. And so you'll probably stop sooner than you want to stop because you're frightened about losing the position to all those people behind you. And you'll find as soon as you come in the pits, if your race pace was lousy, those cars will just go, thank you. And then they'll just hair off into the distance in free air. They will not stop. They'll just run long. They'll overcut you because they've been sitting on their tyres gently and they got loads left in the car, and they'll just disappear. So you have to have half an eye on the race pace and half an eye on the qualifying pace, and spend as much of the weekend as you can on the track trying to get the most from that very, very unusual circuit so that you're good in both those conditions.
So James, you've just got back from Italy, a nation known for its lovely food. Were you able to have any lovely pasta or pizza during your time there?
Well, it is a nation known for its lovely food and its splendid way of life. However, we're a team that is known for its appalling eating habits. So we couldn't find a curry house of an appropriate standard. We did find a Chinese place on the first evening, which was quite good actually, and that was the one of my two eat out experiences. The other one, however, was in an absolutely lovely agriturismo where it was proper Italian food. So I had some lovely capelletti for a primo, and then the second course I had tagliata, which was one of my favorites. So I had a great meal on the Saturday in the hills in a very nice setting. But then there wasn't a lot of eating out in the evenings, but the team catering is actually of a ridiculously high standard, and all of the catering of the weekend had an Italian sort of flavour to it. So there was plenty of pasta and lovely cold meats, and all the things you'd like to eat in Italy were provided to an excellent standard in the track by the trackside catering.